Recording in progress.
That's my cue. Good afternoon. This is the regular City Council meeting for May 2nd, 2023. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councilmember Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Alejandro Gutierrez.
Here.
Councilmember Stanton.
Here.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
And Mayor Rouse.
Here. And I believe we have some ceremonial items.
Yes, item 1, Fair Housing Month 2023.
So this is Fair Housing Month for 2023. April is National Fair Housing Month, which celebrates the 55th anniversary of the passage of the Federal Fair Housing Act of April 11th, 1968. The enactment of this act expanded on previous acts and prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, sex, and as amended, handicap and familial status. And whereas during the month of April, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and fair housing advocates, organizations, and interested parties from both the private and public sectors participated in a national effort to promote fair housing with the theme, Choices for All Voices, Building an Equitable Future, which underscores the federal administration's commitment and progress towards advancing equity in housing and securing equal access housing opportunities for all. Whereas, according to the 2022 Fair Housing Trends Report, despite the local, state, and federal laws prohibiting discrimination, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and partner agencies received more than 11,000 complaints alleging discrimination based on one or more of the Fair Housing Act's 7 protected classes, which are race, color, national origin, religion, sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity, disability and familial status, and whereas in efforts towards advancing equity in housing locally and as part of the city's participation in Fair Housing Month, notices will be placed on the city's website directing residents to information about the rental housing mediation program and the city's fair housing effort. A fair housing display can be viewed in the interest of City Hall, and an announcement will be placed in the city's newsletter. Now, therefore, I, Randy Rouse, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby proclaim April 2023 as Fair Housing Month and urge all citizens to understand and exercise their right to equal housing opportunity. Ms. Pavano.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse and council members, for this very important proclamation. On behalf of the Rental Housing Mediation Program and Board, we thank you for your support.
Very good. And you have a second ceremonial item?
Yes, item 2, Employee Recognition Service Award pins.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, council members. This is the time of each month that we like to recognize our employees for their service with the city, and we in 5-year increments. So starting with 5 years, Jasmine Showers, Water Resources Specialist in the Public Works Department. Adele Booker, painter at the airport. With 10 years, Donovan Macaron, Laboratory Analyst 2 in the Public Works Department. With 15 years, Brian Baxter, Fire Captain. Josh Brusu, Fire Captain. Paul Spinelli, Fire Engineer. Andrew Lee, Fire Engineer. And Joe Martliner, Fire Engineer, obviously all with the Fire Department. Eddie Aguilar, Senior Wastewater Treatment Plant Operator in the Public Works Department. Ernesto Lazaro, Water Distribution Operator Technician 2. Anthony Trejo, Water Distribution Operator Technician 1. and Seth Gelber, wastewater treatment plant operator 3, all with the police department. The Public Works Department. And then with 20 years, Ramon Bravo, wastewater collection system lead operator, also in the Public Works Department.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. And with that, Ms. Bjork, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mayor Rouse.
Okay, very good. With that, we'll move on to the consent calendar, and you have some items to read, Ms. Clerk.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 4, loan forgiveness for Transition House Homeless Families Shelter located at 434 East Ortega Street, ordinance introduction and resolution. B, introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving a second amendment to the Declaration of Covenants, conditions, and restrictions imposed on real property located at 434 East Ortega Street to restart a new 90-year term of use as a homeless family shelter. C, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending resolution number 22059, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2023 to approve an increase in fiscal year 2023 expenditure appropriations in the Affordable Housing Fund in the amount of $460,000 to record forgiveness of loans receivable. Item 5, set a date for public hearing regarding renewal of levy for fiscal year 2024 for the Wildland Fire Suppression Assessment District resolution. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara declaring its intention to continue the wildland fire suppression assessment within the foothill and extreme foothill zones, declaring the work to be of more than general or ordinary benefit, and describing the district to be assessed to pay the cost and expense thereof, preliminarily approving the updated engineer's report, stating intention to continue assessments for fiscal year 2024, and establishing a time of 2 p.m. on Tuesday, June 6, 2023, in City Council chambers for a public hearing on the wildland fire suppression assessment. And that's all the items, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and then we do have a request to pull item 6 from public. Can we read that one, please?
Yes, item 6, authorization to amend the legal services with Colantuno, Highsmith, and Watley PC for special counsel services agreement.
All right, very good. So with that, can we get a motion for the entire consent calendar absent item 6, which we will vote on separately?
So move.
Moved by Friedman. Second by Sneddon. May I have the tote board?
Yes, and this is a motion by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Councilmember Sneddon for the entirety of the consent calendar except for item 6.
Passes unanimously 7-0. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we will move on to general public comment, and this is for the general public who want to speak on an item that is not on the agenda, but is within the purview of this body. You have 3 minutes at the podium, and we'll start out with John Blankenship.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is John Blankenship. I'm the founding director of the Pierre Clyson's Veterans Foundation, a 501c3. I've been approached by the most professional air show group from back east wanting to do a air show here in Santa Barbara in 2024. They're looking at like October or November. It would be a 2-day event. This particular company, the David Schultz air shows, have done 550 air shows across the United States and elsewhere. They also have done, just did the air show down at Point Mugu, Hueneme, and they also did Huntington Beach, Biloxi, Mississippi. That's just the most recent ones. Now, there will be an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, that will come before you at some point. And they need all the time they can because we're a year and a half away from having an air show. They would like to do it at Ledbetter Beach out over the ocean. And like I say, they are the most professional in the United States. So that will be coming at some point here. It's probably 50,000 people. They had 100,000 people come to Huntington Beach to see the air show. Probably 50,000 would be here at Santa Barbara since we're not in LA. The other thing I'd like to do is invite all of you to Memorial Day at the Santa Barbara Cemetery, and that's May 29th. And I think some of you have been there many times, and it's we have the Santa Barbara Choral Society, the Primetime Band, and the Gold Coast Pipe Band, and also a flyover. So that's at 11 o'clock on Monday, May 29th. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to Mr. Howard Green.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and council members. I spoke to you via Zoom last week. I'm not sure that because of the timing and the coordination whether my message really came through. I am asking really for each of you, including Mr. Mayor, to think about locations other than recreation department facilities that would be suitable for congregate meals for senior citizens. This was suspended for the last almost 3 years now because of the COVID. People who would have been eligible to go to the congregate were actually given home-delivered meals. And this was a waiver of the requirements for home-delivered, and unfortunately, the Central Coast Commission is going to have to enforce that either at the end of next month or sometime in June. It takes some time to vet all the people. So I'm coming again to ask each of you to, do you have this now? Look at the number of poverty people in each of your districts, and this is a swag. Multiply that by the percent of older people in your district, and the bottom line is only 2 districts or less than 1,000 people that are old and likely poor also. I mean, it doesn't necessarily go together. Churches that have kitchens might work out. Maybe a vacant restaurant. And Mr. Mayor, you know that business very well, so maybe you can identify some possibilities also. So I again ask that you feed them either to me or to the executive director of the Central Coast Commission for Senior Citizens, for which I am your rep. And that's why I'm trying to push the spaghetti needle. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have E-Planet Thunderstriker.
Thank you. I think you already know I'm E-Planet Thunderstriker. This is a copy of the first page of the claim form I've just submitted against Santa Barbara. I'd like to read a couple of the things. Receptionist failed to receive or forward pages in 2022. Failure to submit document appropriately by clerk. Risk management characterizing discourse with self. City attorney failure to resolve inappropriate interaction. I also have on the second page, HG, ongoing manipulation of people in the vicinity, possible treason, creating dysfunctional society, and arrest, harassment, and discrimination. So I was trying to discuss some of those items when the mayor interrupted me before. I also want to comment that I was interested in making a comment on public item 6 that
That's coming up next, Mr. Thunderstriker. Would you like to go ahead and do that now, or Mr. Item 6? You have 2 slips in.
well, they skipped over it. It was pulled from public, and I'm just putting out there that it was on the agenda, going to be public, and I wanted to do 2 or 3 minutes to comment that because of the kind of corruption that I'm dealing with, I don't know that this is necessarily related or not, or how appropriate or inappropriate is related to my situation, but I have a concern that based on things that have been going on for several years, that I'm blacklisted in the music industry, and I'm dealing with more political corruption than somebody who is like a homeless person who trained himself to produce music could ever be dealing with. And clearly, the council here has done something inappropriate as a certainty. She was aware of John saying that there was not going to be anything going on related to my document theft because I said a particular person stole it. well, if your house gets burglarized and you say, well, there's a homeless guy living down the street, doesn't mean that the cops aren't going to investigate it because the burglary still happened. So she knows that that happened. John knows that I didn't say that. That person that characterized my statements is also the person who I submitted a copy of something that I still have the original related to when Holly wouldn't accept any papers for the area representative, the mayor, the council as a whole, and she didn't advise me about public comments to the clerk. And when I'm talking to the Board of Supervisors, I'm saying, well, there's some questionable activity related to Trump and certainly related to our current vice president when she had a fundraising party with Katy Perry, whose Dark Horse song was blacklisting me, and the manager of Demi Lovato and Kanye West, who are also both as certainly negatively involved. It's like I'm dealing with treason.
Thank you. All right, very good. And do we have speakers online?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one speaker online, Aaron Ashland. Aaron Ashland, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I wasn't happy last week when you warned us not to bring up old stuff, Mr. Mayor, about the promenade, and then when it was your turn to talk, that's exactly what you did. Do as I say, not as I do doesn't sit well with me for some reason. On that note, you seem perfectly willing to show your distaste for Councilwoman Gutierrez's decision, but you missed the whole point. She was right. When it was all said and done, her bravery allowed for further discussion, which led to a better outcome for the people, for the city and the people who voted for her. Bravo. And I believe this is a sign of a council that is working for the people. Mr. Mayor, intelligent people often are willing to change their minds when presented with new information. I felt like you were bullying her, and I personally think you owe her an apology, and probably a public one at that. Seriously, this is America, so you don't have to listen to me, but that was cowardice and unkind. She is responsible for her vote, not you. Deal with it and stop acting like a child when you don't get your way. I'll say it. Thank you, Councilwoman Gutierrez, for standing up for what your residents wanted and listening instead of talking. Who cares if the grumpy old mayor doesn't like it? Your residents do, so keep it up. Mr. Mayor, I read that you're now facing budgeting woes. I wonder if there are any creative solutions out there rather than just cutting half of the city's services. So, Mr. Mayor, I have a bit of an issue. You see, I can live with one less zoning enforcement person or one less city attorney, but we can't do with any less police officers. So we have an issue because I think we need to be paying way more to our officers to keep the ones that we have and to attract new ones. To be honest, I think it's going to be expensive, and I don't want our city to be unsafe. So I have some ideas I want you all to consider raising money to help paying for more police and hopefully not having to cut as many services. Here are my ideas. I would like to point out one thing the city has going on that works as intended: hotels. If you aren't sure, look at just how many applications there are to build a new hotel on any free inch of land. What works is that you ended up charging the tourist and not the hotel to support the city's infrastructure. However, I'm afraid we don't leave the business owners with enough profits to keep up their businesses like we do the hotel owners. And if you think about things like longboards and other businesses that are on the city's property, I think that's maybe a bit of why they didn't work out after long periods of time. Number one, harbor businesses should only pay 10% rent and then charge people who use the harbor 2% as a usage tax. So you'd actually earn 0.7%, which I believe would be, I don't know, a lot of money probably at the end of the year. I think this would also leave the businesses on the harbor and the pier with better opportunities to reinvest in their businesses and be better over time. I think you could raise the TOT to 14%. I don't know anyone that's ever knocked onto a city because the Fed tax is 1% more. But if you went to 14 over a series of 2 to 3 years, you would net 2.7 million for 1%. And when you got to 14%, that would be 5.4 million. Number three, start the POT, the Promenade Occupancy Tax. Once the promenade is complete, all sales made in the public right-of-way would be subject to a 1% tax, which would go to the city fund to help pay for things like cleaning and stuff like that. But
End of
wouldn't
time.
hurt the businesses.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. Any further commenters online?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one further commenter with a raised hand for consent. That is Anna Marie Gott. Anna Marie Gott, please go ahead. Or Anna Marie Gott, go ahead.
Good afternoon, City Council. Sorry about that. I actually am going to disagree with Mr. Ashland. I thought the City Council got it wrong last week. I believe that anyone that is using the public right-of-way has a responsibility to pay a fair market value for that real estate. And we are now being underpaid, and you are basically trying to claim that because of increased taxes that are collected, that we're just going to go ahead and allow the businesses not to pay a fair rate. So I believe you got it wrong, and I think that that is going to be reflected in the budget that you guys are going to have to deal with. You have a $4 million deficit moving into the next year, and you're going to have to cut services, needed services, while you're not collecting a fair market rate for that real estate. Beyond that, Mr. Ashland suggested a way to actually, help pay for police services. Well, a few years ago, I sent you an email, and that was about an email to Councilmember Gutierrez, and I got it wrong when I sent the email because I think of something as a tax, and it's actually a charge for harm. And that has to do with the ability of the city council to actually charge and collect a charge for harm for anyone that sells alcohol. Right now in the state of California, we collect 0.21 cents. Okay, so 21 cents on alcohol. That's our tax. But the cost to actually police anyone who is in a DUI, anyone that's drunk, people that have domestic violence disputes because of alcohol, it actually costs us $2.44. So think about that. The taxes we collect are 21 cents, but we actually spend $2.44 to actually go out and manage incidences that are related to alcohol. And I think that we really need to change that. And the city council can by adopting a charge for harm model, which would require anyone that sells alcohol to collect an extra fee, and that money then goes to pay for all of the police services.
End of time.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there further commenters online? Okay.
No, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry? No? All right, very good. We'll close public comment with that, and we'll take a report from the Finance Committee. Mr. Friedman.
Mr. Mayor, you still have not taken comment on item number 6 or
We
voted on
did them
that
both.
item.
We need to vote on it, though,
Yes.
right? Okay, so, thank you, Ms. Connect. So we need to vote on item 6 separately because we took it off the original vote. May I have a motion for item 6?
So move.
Moved by Friedman. Second by Sneddon. May we have the vote? Thank you, Ms. Connect, for reminding me of that.
Yes, this is a motion by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Councilmember Sneddon to approve item 6 as recommended.
All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. With that, we will go to the report from the Finance Committee. Mr. Friedman.
The Finance Committee met today, and we reviewed, as part of the budget, the fiscal year 24 general fund fee schedule, and gave comments but took no action at that time.
All right, thank you very much. And then we'll go to council member committee assignment reports. Anyone? Nobody did their homework? Okay.
Hold on, give me a second.
So we got some short-term memory loss going on at council here, but Mr. Freeman.
I'll go. So I attended the State of the Zoo, and then Library Reading Ambassadors Program. Thanks to all the third graders for the Community Academy. Congratulations, attended that with the mayor. And attended the League of Cities had their semi-annual Channel League city, so it was an opportunity for all of us from throughout Ventura, San Luis, and Santa Barbara counties to get together up in San Luis, and then also participate in Earth Day office hours at the annual Earth Day.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended the State Street Interim Operations Subcommittee with Councilmember Jordan and Sneddon, and attended the Earth Day festivities and UCSB alumni events.
All right, very good. Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Is this just our official reports, or?
Yeah, because then we have the engagement things afterwards.
Okay, then I also attended the State Street Interim Operations meeting and the joint housing meeting with the county, and also office hours at Earth Day.
All right, thank you very much. No one else? Okay, very good. With that, we will go to our administrative reports. We have an item to read.
Yes, item 8, OIR Group Audit of Santa Barbara Police Department Policies, Procedures, and Practices.
Very good. Ms. Anderson, Chief Gordon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse, council members. I'm Barbara Anderson, Senior Assistant to the City Administrator, and I'm joined this afternoon by Police Chief Kelly Gordon. We will be sharing a brief overview of the OIR Group Audit of the Santa Barbara Police Department, Policies, Procedures, and Practices. As you know, the City Council approved conducting an audit of the Santa Barbara Police Department on June 6, 2022, as a key component of creating and implementing a new civilian oversight system for law enforcement. The OIR Group, an independent team of police practices experts, was the firm selected to conduct the audit due to their more than 2 decades of experience in oversight. The initiation of the audit by the city was uncommon in that, unlike other jurisdictions, the city's review was not in response to a critical incident or publicized case of police misconduct. Instead, we took a proactive step to ensure transparency of the department's policies and procedures, as well as accountability to the highest of standards and best practices. The scope of work of the audit included review of the need for executive development and leadership training, the department's complaint process, use of force training and review, employee retention and recruiting, and general policy compliance. The audit was completed in March 2023 and included 31 recommendations for consideration. We recently presented to the Fire and Police Commission last Thursday, so they, again, were the first review body given their new authorities in police oversight, and we're here presenting this afternoon to you. We'll be highlighting some observations shared by the OIR group in the final report, as well as a handful of the key recommendations. We're happy to address any part of the report and answer any of your specific questions at the end of the presentation. The first area of scope of work was executive development and training. We recognize that changes in leadership over the last several years resulted in different approaches and styles that placed various emphasis on certain aspects of the department. With the transition from interim leadership to new leadership with Chief Gordon, there have already been visible and positive changes in organizational structure, department culture, and community engagement. We fully anticipated that low staffing levels and its impact on all aspects of the department would emerge as a cross-cutting theme throughout the report, and believe that the recommendations are in line with the significant time, attention, and resources that will be directed to recruiting and retaining officers. We also appreciate that the OIR group noted that officer wellness is promoted in positive ways, and department leadership laid the groundwork for community engagement that preceded the national movement for police reform. The audit recommends that the police department establish mechanisms to ensure that all its personnel and its supervisors and managers in particular engage in regular forms of professional development beyond mandatory state training requirements, with an eye toward increasing their own skill and expanding the agency's capabilities at the leadership level. This is one of the highest priorities for Chief Gordon and the department, and you will see resources being allocated specifically to meet these objectives in the department's recommended fiscal year 2024 budget. The OIR group also highlighted initiatives and programs that focus specifically on community-based field training and relationship building with local community leaders and organizations, and encourage the continued prioritization on these efforts. We wholeheartedly agree, and as the commission has already, as the council has already experienced, community engagement programs like Coffee with a Cop are back from being paused during the COVID-19 pandemic, and youth programs like Police Activities League continue to expand their reach and impact. The second area for the scope of work was the complaint process. The audit specifically highlighted that the volume of external complaints received by the police department is generally low, and noted that the community is largely supportive of the department's work. OIR Group's review of actual police department operations in the field reflected not only a high degree of competence by the department's personnel, but also a regard for service and respectful interactions with the public. The department has a detailed personnel complaint policy that is available online as part of the department's policy manual, and it includes a statement that the department takes seriously complaints about its services and the conduct of its officers. More recently, lieutenants from respective officers' units of assignment have been incorporated into the assessment and decision-making on the discipline process, which is consistent with the notion of effective discipline as an organizational priority for which responsibility should be shared within the managerial team. As detailed in the audit report, supervisors have the primary responsibility for receiving complaints and determining whether they can be handled immediately or need further investigation. The intake process is also documented and tracked, which gives accountability to the intake supervisor's decision-making and allows for even low-level concerns to be monitored in case they become trends or warrant non-disciplinary interventions. OIR Group noted that the agency should take steps to ensure that the mechanics of investigations are clear to all participants and that status updates and timeline approximations are shared with subjects during the pendency of open cases. The audit highlighted, that the police department was already in process of reviewing its procedures and committed to going beyond the letter of the law in its written correspondence and potential follow-up conversations with interested complainants. Of the recommendations relating specifically to the complaint process, all of them were already being implemented by the Community Accountability Team and Professional Standards Unit. Next is use of force training and review. The audit highlighted the extraordinarily low number of use of force incidents and stated that overall, the department does not use force often, and when it does, the type of force is relatively minor. OIR Group reported that the overall numbers are not surprising given what we've heard from several sources during our meetings in Santa Barbara, that there's a culture that supports restraint and de-escalation of conflict rather than a reliance on physically aggressive policing. In many cases, the OIR Group noted, officers display an impressive amount of patience in encounters with individuals in mental health crises. OIR Group noted that the officer reports of their actions are thorough and generally well-written, but there is room for improvement in the way the department documents supervisory review of these incidents. This includes specific reference to de-escalation tactics or strategies employed, either actions officers took in an attempt to de-escalate or why they could not make such efforts. The department has recently implemented a requirement that supervising sergeants are to complete a use of force memo that will provide a summary of the incident, document the interviews of the subject of the force and any witnesses, and make findings and recommendations about whether any remedial measures are needed. OIR Group also suggested adding a prompt for supervisors to recommend a commendation to recognize exemplary tactics and performance. Lastly is employee retention and recruiting. The audit emphasized what we all know to be true, that law enforcement agencies across the country are facing unprecedented challenges in hiring and retaining officers, and that Santa Barbara is no exception. The department has seen a significant decline in the number of people applying to the agency over the last 6 years. The report also accurately captured that the challenges of recruiting for law enforcement jobs in general are exacerbated in Santa Barbara by the high cost of housing, coupled with the distance between Santa Barbara and more affordable cities. Despite these challenges, the department is excelling in recruiting more female officers. Among the current officer ranks, 27% are women. This is significantly more than the national average of 12%. The OIR group focused specifically on gender, and we just want to acknowledge that the diversity of the department goes beyond gender lines. Chief Gordon continues to prioritize building a culture of inclusivity within the department and more accessibility in serving our broader community. The OIR group uplifted and encouraged continuation of several proactive and innovative approaches that the department has implemented to address some of the difficulties in the current hiring environment. This includes helping to address the financial burden caused by the wait time between identifying an officer that agency wants to hire and the start of the next available training academy. They've been doing this by employing newly hired but not yet trained recruits in temporary civilian assignments. The audit also recommended that recruitment strategies be updated to evolve with the changing nature of police work. The priorities of the department also align with this recommendation, and we anticipate that the chief will speak to some of these recruiting and retention strategies and the need for more additional resources during the budget process, as well as in future Fire and Police Commission meetings where we'll get into specific strategies and policies that will be refined and deployed for that purpose. Now I'll turn it over to Chief Gordon to add her leadership insights and reflections on the audit and the recommendations.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. I'm going to keep my comments very brief and welcome questions, as does Ms. Anderson. I clearly have been here a whole 7 months, I think, now. It's, I think, unique to come in when the audit, the audit would typically be done prior to my arrival or as a result of something major incident. So this provides me a unique opportunity to take the feedback that is provided in the OIR report at the same time that I've been doing my own kind of deep dive and analysis of the department. And it really supports and reaffirms the direction that we're moving. In terms of the changes to the complaint process, those were well underway. The changes to the use of force, although the department did, in fact, investigate use of forces, it's just the way in which we do it now is more comprehensive to include a separate memo that includes de-escalation. As it mentions, we now allow also for supervisors to provide a space to provide exemplarily or accommodation for officers, because a lot of what we see and when you watch the videos is the officers should be commended for the low level of force and how much patience they use in a lot of situations. So not just used to be critical, but also be used to also provide the other side of the spectrum, which is the complementary piece of it, so that it's a more balanced approach. Same thing with complaints and making sure that we're balanced in terms of how we communicate with the community, but also balanced internally in how we communicate with our officers that are the subject of complaints. So it's a process of being more transparent on both sides. So this report reaffirms that. It also reaffirms, I know Ms. Anderson talked about, bringing to you some of our recruitment strategies. That is still in the works. We have a lot of work to do. We have put more resources into it, and that is something that we're evolving and looking at how we can be better. But you'll hear me talk about this tomorrow in our budget workshop session, how we really tap into our local community for that. And that's really where our focus is. And I think we're already seeing some success in it, despite how challenging it is. But it really, I think, overall, really highlights the excellent work that's being done within the department and has continued to be done, despite all of the staffing challenges and the challenges that the pandemic and other things have brought the department. It really reaffirms the level of talent, the level of dedication, and really how fortunate we are to have who we have, sworn and non-sworn, in our department. It makes me very proud to be the chief here. But like I said, it reaffirms all the great work that we're doing, and, you know, the need for leadership and training and those other things. Those are the fun pieces, so to speak. Those are things that we, you know, get to grow and opportunities for us. And, you know, we're certainly focused on those and really thinking outside the box in the way in which we do that. So you'll see tomorrow, you know, in terms of the budget, we're not cutting the training budget or those areas or the recruitment, because those are areas we have to invest in our employees to be successful. And I think the OIR report reaffirms that. You know, there are clearly a few of the recommendations that we haven't implemented all the way, but we are in the process of implementing all of them. Some of them will take more time than others because we want to be thoughtful about the way in which we approach it. We want to make sure that whatever we implement is sustainable and that we're not just trying to come up with an answer that and a procedure that's not going to work long term. So we're just trying to be really thoughtful about all of those pieces and making sure that we're implementing things at the correct pace and at a manageable pace. You know, last week the new tasers were approved. That will allow us to address that particular recommendation when those are in, because of the type of taser they are, and they are the greatest and most cutting edge technology. So it's one of those things where we go from 25 feet distance to 45 feet. The mechanism of which it operates is safer for not just the officer, but the individual who it's deployed against. So those things we're looking at to also leverage technology when we're looking at some of these recommendations as well. So some of them will take more time as we look for the appropriate way to implement them, but we are committed to making sure that we get through all 31 recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. And is that it for your presentation,
Yes,
Senator?
Mayor Russ, we're available for any questions.
Okay, very good. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief, and Ms. Anderson. So I'd really just start out before I ask a question and echo the comments I already heard about the, and just be very appreciative that we were in the position of a result of the people that we had here already, putting us in a position where we weren't having to do this in reaction to some unfortunate event. And we chose to do it proactively. There's only 3 of you in the room today in uniform, but there's more than 100 out there that should be sharing in that appreciation and thanks for putting us in that situation. I'm sure the opposite is just a horrible situation to live through, and we should actually just be so thankful that we had it within this context to do. So I really just have one question, and I'm going to ask that question, and then I'm going to tell you what kind of I'm thinking in my brain on that question and run off on a tangent. But the specific question is, when you look at the big report, which is a page or page and a half of an item with a recommendation, and then that's distilled into the matrix sheet where that page and a half is now 2 sentences, and then the response is only 1 sentence. I get lost because I don't know what I'm, this is certainly an area that I'm not a subject matter expert, thank God, right? But are our responses, your responses to the OIR report, are those responses then judged or vetted by somebody also like the OIR group that gave the recommendation to grade whether our response is actually in line with what they thought the recommendation was they were making? And I'll give you a simple example for me. Anyhow, it's the first recommendation where it talks about professional training and advancement. And in the recommendation, it says all its personnel and its supervisors and managers in particular. And in the implementation notes part, it just says managers. So there's a little disconnect in language there. And I get that I don't know what I'm reading necessarily in the response, and I certainly don't know what I'm reading necessarily in the recommendation, but does someone other than us internally, the kind of the fox in the hen house already guarding the chickens, address how we responded to these recommendations, and if they met that recommendation completely, if they didn't need to meet it completely, if we're still going to work on it, or in the one case where you declined it, you just said, obviously thought the recommendation didn't make much sense and we didn't do it. So if you kind of get that, just that question, or I'm sorry, I forgot, or instead of if it goes back to who made the recommendations, is that a process to put in front of the, I'll have the name wrong, I'm sure, the Hassan Group, because I think we're still working with them. So how do we balance that one sentence response to the multiple page recommendation and know that it's really addressing that recommendation?
I completely understand your question.
Thank you. And I spoke way too long then. So.
I mean, you're going to make me work, but that's okay. There's two parts. One part of it is we just wanted to provide a quick snapshot and matrix that was easier to break the whole entire report down. So when you talk about managers versus supervisors, we are going to do our managers now, and in the next year we're doing supervisors. And so you'll see that this is a multi-part process where we are going to have to report back to the Fire and Police Commission on what we've done in each of these. And we gave a very thorough kind of in-depth to them as well at the Fire and Police Commission. So as we go through each of these recommendations, like we just went through the whole complaint process with the Fire and Police Commission. And so they get a much more in-depth answer to what we're doing in terms of each of these. The other piece is Mr. Aiden he was here for the OIR report to Fire and Police Commission, is providing feedback to myself, feedback to Ms. Anderson, as well as to our community accountability, and is taking the time. He met with several members of our department to make sure that we are, in fact, implementing these in the appropriate way. Ms. Anderson comes back and asks questions if she has questions of us. So it's an ongoing interactive process. This isn't just a one and done type of report or what we're doing with the recommendations. We've had some good dialogue on a couple of them, in terms of how we get where we need to go with Mr. Aiden. And I will be the first to say that, I look forward to continuing to work with him and his expertise in those areas to make sure that we are, in fact, hitting the mark.
Super. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the efforts to keep our community safe. Could you just remind me when the report was started? Like, what year span did it cover?
The report was done in, I believe they did their site visit in October, November. And then they chose what years in terms of pulling complaints and use of forces. So they pulled the prior year, and they told us what they wanted to. We didn't determine what they used in terms of the report. We gave them full access to whatever they asked for in their expertise from us. So we didn't determine what they pulled from. They asked us what they wanted to review, and then we provided them everything for the review process. But they did the most current. They didn't go back 5 or 10 years, because they want to know what we're doing now, not what we used to do. They want to make sure we're adapting our current practices, because things have certainly changed in the department in the last 5 years. So they looked at particularly what we're doing today, not what we did 5 years ago.
So that was 2021?
They pulled 21 and some 22 is what they pulled.
Okay.
They picked a particular time frame and they were consistent, and that's what they pulled.
Okay. And what was the reasoning to pull from those 2 years?
That's their methodology. They, like I said, we didn't determine. They wanted the most recent. Ms. Anderson may be able to speak to that, but they wanted the most recent time frame. They didn't want to go, like I said, 5 years ago, because that's not what we currently do now. They're not looking at that far back. They want to know what we've done in the last year, because that's what they're basing their recommendations on, is what we do now.
Mayor Russ and Councilmember Gutierrez, it is an assessment and audit on current practices of the department, current policies of the department. So it went back as far as 2021, including some of 2022. Chief Gordon is correct on that. That's what our particular scope of work and request was of them, current practices.
So, so do you think that it's hard to say, right? Because obviously the last couple of years, because of the pandemic, kind of changed everything. So do you think it's a pretty good representation, accurate representation of what our police force is dealing with?
I think it's a very accurate representation of what we currently deal with. You know, they came and they looked at our current uses of force, they reviewed video, they didn't just read a report, they actually watched all the body cam footage and made, you know, what is in the actual audit report is a very brief, not even a full synopsis, it's just a brief couple sentences on most of the incidents that they reviewed, but they did a really thorough review. We literally provided them all the reports, all the body cam footage and everything to go with it. So their review of each of these incidents is very thorough. Same thing in the complaints, you know, they give a brief 1 or 2 sentence snippet, you know, kind of synopsis, just so that the public has an idea of the type of complaints that we receive. But they looked at the entire package, including listened to interviews and everything else within it. So they didn't just, you know, we didn't just provide them a summary and say, here you go. They literally took everything that we had, including the witness interviews on the complaints and made their determination on what they felt about them. So I think it's very thorough. I think it's a very good representation of what our officer are facing. They did come out and do a ride-along for a half a shift to see, you know, I think their analysis of the mental health and the de-escalation is accurate based on everyone they spoke to and what they saw for themselves in terms of the use of force videos and the complaints.
So when it comes to recruitment, did they give any kind of, I don't know, some kind of premonition of when recruitment might increase, or do they see that this is kind of, you know, what's happening all over the country or for a while, or did they kind of give you an estimate as to when?
They didn't provide an estimate. I think that, you know, one of the biggest things for recruitment is how we market ourselves. It's not something that law enforcement has had to do in the past. You know, when I started, there was, you know, more than 1,000 people for one position. You know, I was, the first agency I applied with, I was in the top 10 and I didn't get hired. They only took one, and there were over 1,000 to start. You know, now that looks dramatically different. So I think that, you know, with anything, you know, things change over time, and I wish I had a crystal ball to tell us when we would be out of this challenge. But we don't have it. You know, we are 100% committed to finding new ways and thinking outside the box. And that's exactly what we're doing and what our staff is doing right now. You know, we're now doing a class that we're calling it, and we sit down and go over the personal history statement and what they can expect, and helping those that are interested get their documents together to help them be more successful. We did a women's recruitment event, you know, and did mocktails and for all the different positions within the department, and we had our sworn staff and our non-sworn staff there to answer questions. So all those things are in the process. You know, we have the Santa Barbara factor. It is a real thing for us. I can tell you from recently moving here, the struggle is real for housing. I have a great job, and the struggle is real for me in terms of housing. So for a new hire, that struggle is even harder. You know, I will tell you I'm losing 2 officers to Santa Maria this month because, you know, their pay is very comparable. They get a $30,000 hiring bonus, and they will no longer have to commute from up north down here. Those are just our real challenges, and we know that. So we have to do everything that we can to create a culture and environment internally that people want to be here, which I think we're successfully doing. It's going to take time. We're using different academies now. Ventura only does an academy twice a year. We're willing to send new recruits to Rio Hondo or other academies in order to be able to do them more often, so that we're not just cycling into 2 academies. I can tell you my recruitment staff is working extremely hard. We have a couple people assigned to do backgrounds internally to cut down the amount of time. Someone who recently came back is, we've added to the recruitment team on a short-term assignment. We are doing everything that we can. You see them at every event we have in the city now, doing a recruitment table. We're working with Santa Barbara City College. We're very intentional about what we're doing. We're going to do a new recruitment video, and it comes to all the little things. You know, we just did a physical agility test. You know, I make sure that I'm there. Assistant Chief Kushner was doing push-ups with our recruits. Like, those little things matter, because that's what sells us versus going to another department. So it's those smaller, intangible, so to speak, pieces that we have to work through, but we also have to work through, you know, what we already know is the Santa Barbara factor, because that is a big challenge for us. So I wish I had a crystal ball, and that was a long answer to a short question, but I think it's important for everyone to understand that, especially in this forum. We are really working hard and diligently. Everyone is 100%. I don't have a crystal ball as to when this gets better. I really don't. You know, I've been doing this 27 years, and I can tell you I wouldn't change what I do for a living if I started all over again today. I think policing is a noble profession. I think there is a heart for service out there. We just have to tap into those individuals differently than we used to. And I think we'll get there. It's going to take time and dedication and resources to do that, though.
And Councilmember Gutierrez, I wanted to add, you know, our commitment is to lead into the opportunity and to not go back. The field is evolving. Who wants to be a police officer is evolving. And let's embrace that. Let's embrace community expectations, trust, the calls for service, how they're varying the needs of our community, the diversity of our community, all is changing and evolving. So leaning into that, moving forward, being innovative, being adaptive to the new environment, I hope will yield at least the number of applicants that we used to receive. Yeah.
Did the report allow you to give your opinion on how you could be more effective or efficient in your duties?
The report was their assessment. They came in and spoke to several members of staff and others. But it wasn't necessarily a conversation or a back and forth, you know, of what I wanted to see in the report. This is their assessment, and which I appreciate. This is their outside independent assessment. And it was, you know, concentrated on the areas that the city had identified for the scope. So, you know, we're always learning. We're always trying to do better. You know, we take the input of the Fire and Police Commission, Mr. Aiden, you know, the community. We're really, you know, leaning in to all of it right now.
Can we ask you that question? Obviously, right now you're on the spot, but like, can we ask you for your opinion about how we could help you be more effective and more efficient?
I think, you know, that conversation really comes down to how we can work together to understand the realities of the budget and understand the realities of resources, and really having hard conversations on how we, you know, towards the Vision 2030 and be sustainable to get where we need to go. And I would welcome, you know, I think those would be great one-on-one conversations to have, because I would want them to be thoughtful, and I don't want to provide a off the top of my head answer on that, because I think those are the conversations and the difficult conversations that we need to have, because there is not an easy answer. You know, there is a significant financial piece, there's a significant workforce housing piece. You know, I think pushing towards a new building and those other things are also important. But I think those are strategies that we can sit down and have conversations over, because I do think they're important, difficult conversations to have.
Thank you.
Ms. Nedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I have a lot of comments that I'll say, but just questions really along those same lines. First, I just want to say I'm so proud of our police department. This audit brought about exactly what I would hope for, the transparency of really highlighting the already progressive department that we have, and then what there is to build on. And already you've implemented so many changes that are positive and in line with the recommendations. So I do want to ask you about maybe one or two of those, but just along the lines of what Councilmember Gutierrez was asking about retaining officers also. So it's really clear when you already just mentioned too, in that cost of housing and the loss of those officers, and the newest recruits. There's such an impressive group of officers, and it really does seem to be changing, as Ms. Anderson just said about who it is who's looking to be an officer. And I just want to give you this opportunity. I mean, you're a new recruit, so maybe what attracted you to being a part of this department, or what it is that you'd like to highlight. Why should someone want to come and stay and serve in Santa Barbara?
Well, I think the opportunity, to serve along such a amazing group of men and women, sworn and non-sworn, the level of dedication, the level of caring about each other, I think is really something to highlight. You're working within a department where, I guess the best example would be to give is, I've been trying to meet with all employees, and I ask them 5 questions. Why are you in policing? Why Santa Barbara? What's one thing we can do to improve? What's one thing that we do well? And where do you see yourself in 5 years? So taking that information, it really shapes where we move in the future, right? Because I want to know why, and there's the purposes and the reasons are a little different for everybody, but we have a high number of personnel that have a personal tie to Santa Barbara, or have recently moved here and live here and want to give back to their community, and we'll talk about that, where they moved for another reason here or went to school here. I have a particular officer who moved here because of his wife, and now, one of the reasons, and he works a difficult unit, is that he wants to make sure that he treats the community the way that he would want his neighbor to treat him. And that is 100%, I think, what you see here. The level of respect and the level of compassion that we see from our officers is not what you see in every department. It's just not. So I think that's something to highlight. When you ask them what their education is, a lot of them have psychology degrees, a lot of them have communication degrees. They come from a different interest, not just the standard, well, I have a degree in criminal justice. Their backgrounds are varied. They're very diverse. I think that's another piece. If you look at our diversity makeup, we're almost completely in line with the community. If you put a pie chart up, because I just did it, with what the makeup of the population of our city is and what the makeup of our department is, it almost mirrors it. Most of them are within almost 1%. So I think that's another piece to highlight. We're a very diverse department. And that is something that, you want to be part of. I mean, and then there is the other piece of it. Who wouldn't want to be by the beach, right? Who wouldn't want the things that Santa Barbara provides in terms of, hiking, beach? Most of the officers and non-sworn staff, that's where their interests are. It's one of the things that draws me here, besides the level and commitment of the department, is where you get to live. That's a big piece, because when you're not at work, that's what you also want for your family. Those are the type of things that you want to be able to do, is walk, you'll often see me down, on Shoreline at the end of the night, trying to get the last bit of daylight, walking the dogs, because that's something that's meaningful to me, and having that opportunity. So I think that is also another piece of what this environment provides. It's not always, this is the first time in my 27 years that I've worked where I lived. And I want to be able to continue to do that, because there is something to say about that. And I think the fact that our officers want to work here also is a testament to what our department and what our community is, because I will tell you, after working in Los Angeles for a majority of my career, you have a concern about maybe going to eat and seeing someone that you have put in jail prior. It's a different environment, and that's the reality here. The way in which we approach the community and the community approaches us back looks different. So I think, that's another thing that we highlight, is what the community has in terms of our families and living here, but the phenomenal job of the men and women of the department, their how they look at it, the level of compassion and empathy, their ability to communicate and connect with the community. Our patrol officers do a phenomenal job. We allow them to do investigations here that other departments don't do. Most departments, the patrol officers don't write warrants and do the level of investigations and make the number of arrests that our patrol officers do. We try to give our patrol officers time to actually complete their calls for service, so that they're giving quality service to our community. Typically in other communities, you take a report, that goes to the Detective Bureau, the level of follow-up, the amount of video that we watch, and all the things, and they can identify, who stole what from marshals, and a lot of the times we end up, making sure that they're held accountable in the right way and in the appropriate ways to provide, the level of service and safety for our community that our community deserves.
Thank you. And then that brings me to another question about, there were 2 programs that were really highlighted in the report that were exemplary and that the auditors thought should be implemented elsewhere. And the one was meeting with members of the community in the first month of service, and the other was the Voices program. And if you could just tell us a little bit more about those programs.
So we do what's called Post Academy. When our recruits graduate from the academy, they spend a few weeks internally, but they spend a whole week meeting with different groups in the community. So we want them to interact with different parts of our community so they understand our community prior to them ever starting their field training program. And so that is something that we always do, and we're not going to go away from that. It's very effective, but we spend about we do spend an entire week meeting, having them meet different folks in the community. And then in terms of Voices, that's a great opportunity that has now become more of a national program. One of our lieutenants, Sean Hill, is the one that started that program here, and it's something that we still do, and that makes sure that we have opportunity to hear the voices of the community, as well as for the community to hear our voices and have difficult conversations in an environment that's not meant to be confrontational.
I really, really particularly applaud that. And then just one more question about officer wellness programs and that are implementing, or things that you might see in the future.
I think that's an area that we can really be more innovative on. And I think that's where we're going to really have to look at. We've had the suggestion that we could implement a yoga program and some other things, but I do think that there are some opportunities, and I was actually having a conversation with a local business person yesterday that is in the wellness field, and I think there's some opportunities to really partner with some local businesses to do things that haven't been done before, that are specific that meet the needs of our department and our community with that. So that's an area that I am looking to be more innovative on, and how we do that. We do a good job of doing critical incident debriefing, and now we make sure that they have the ability to go and get counseling services to culturally competent counselors that understand the stresses of law enforcement. So there are things that we're doing in those areas, but I do think, we have Healthy Warriors deliver meals and those other things, but I think we have an opportunity to be even more innovative in that, and that's an area that we're going to look at in the next couple of years, how we can do that. We just have to take it one bite at a time, because there's a lot of different things to do.
Thank you.
All right, very good. We'll go to public comment on this item. First is E-Planet Thunderstriker.
Thank you. First, I want to say how appreciative I am that we have so many females on the police department. Women are clearly second-class citizens in America, and if that policy was gone throughout all of America, we probably wouldn't have the high sex trafficking rate that people make proclamations for. As far as everything else, this whole audit thing, it's smoke and mirrors. I mean, that council member said, what is it that you can do or whatever? It's like, yeah, that's, he's listening for 5 minutes, I'm listening for 5 minutes. Of course, that's not addressed, because clearly America is trying to devolve our culture and implode in some way, shape, or form. Organized crime these days isn't just the Italian mafia. It's somebody intentionally trying to undermine every aspect of America. I mean, we go from the baby boomers who don't lock their doors at night to, now all my facts may not be correct, the highest incarceration rate in the world. 2 out of 3 crimes aren't reported, and those probably aren't all criminal to criminal. Of those that are reported, how many apprehensions, what percentage, and that go to trial. And then, of course, we have so much plea bargaining and you only have to do 50% of the time. It's like, am I mistaken that America is clearly the most corrupt and criminally oriented first world country in the world? I don't know yet. I need more people to talk to. There's certainly a lot of corruption around me. So as far as the other things, as far as resources and how to change things, well, one, we have to look at people are doing things in government and are related to the police department as well, that's going to intentionally undermine things. This transparency thing is great, but aren't people going to utilize that to see how they can waste resources? I mean, that's clearly what has been going on, what's continually going on. The 50s, they made 911. She's talking about walking your dogs here for last minute of daylight. I believe that. I mean, Santa Barbara is a little bit different than where I've been, but women don't usually walk around at night. 1950, they started 911 because some girl was attacked in the park, and now girls don't really walk around in the park very much, do they? State Street, maybe around the beach. You go to a different city, sun goes down, there aren't any females outside. That's going to create more tension with the guys. You're going to have things like mass shootings. This is being engineered. So I think that that whole thing was just smoke and mirrors. I mean, people that have had 20 years of experience, clearly we've degraded in the last 20 years. So a good idea that maybe I can talk about in the future, but this department and other departments, can spend, an hour, networking with each other and then coming up with how can we stop what's really going on around here.
All right, very good. Lizzie Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and council members. My name is Lizzie Rodriguez, and I'm currently serving as the chair of the Fire and Police Commission. However, today I'm speaking as an individual. Last Thursday's commission meeting was quite exciting for me. It was a culmination of the hard work of the Community Formation Commission and everybody who advocated for oversight of law enforcement in Santa Barbara. We heard results from the OIR report, the first quarter updates on complaints filed against SBPD, and budget presentations from both fire and police. This is what transparency looks like. I am most impressed with the findings of the OIR report. Several discoveries stood out to me. Without mentioning Chief Lori Luno by name, the report did highlight her legacy of uplifting community partnerships and outreach and the wellness programs she brought to the department. The report noted that these two elements aided in the department through national critique of law enforcement during racial reckoning and consciousness-raising protests and demonstrations following the murder of George Floyd. I look forward to the department continuing Luno's legacy and growing community partnerships and wellness programs. The OIR report provided 31 recommendations. Of these, half of them were already implemented and the other half are in the process of being implemented. Our city did a stellar job recruiting and hiring Chief Kelly Gordon, as her knowledge and expertise in progressive policing allowed her to identify these areas of improvement within the first few months of joining the department, positioning the department primed to receive the OIR recommendations. With news sources highlighting many tragedies of brown, black, and trans bodies harmed or killed at the hands of police, it's only natural that communities start to look within and assume the same of our own local departments. With the report findings that less than 0.5% of police contacts include use of force, and that de-escalation is ingrained in the department's culture, it builds confidence within the community that Santa Barbara Police Department holds sanctity for life and is an exception to the national conversation. The Santa Barbara Police Department is in a good place right now. However, I think it's important to pay attention to the report's findings on the department morale, specifically related to staffing shortages, especially as we head into budget hearings. I think it's important to explore the climate within the department and a culture study on the department. It's also important that the OIR report is translated in Spanish and be made public through social media and the city's email. I think you all know me well enough to know that if I have a critique of the department, I'm not shy on sharing it, but today I'm sharing accolades based on the findings of the OIR report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have speakers online for this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. We do not have an action on this. Mr. Jordan, you had a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lizzie, before I forget, I just want to personally thank you for your service, too. You know, you lived through a little bit of a tumultuous time through this whole process and did so gracefully and kept your head about you. So again, I echo what I said to start before and the great position we were in because of the leadership that we had in the department for a long time and being able to do this proactively. If I had one suggestion, it would kind of also tail on with Lizzie's mention of social media and multi-language. And that's, I mean, I just went and looked at the April 21st media release, which is a media release and pretty dry. And I think really we're in both an internal and an external celebratory moment. I get it. The people in the uniform kind of just say, yeah, whatever, this is our job and we do it well, right? I mean, and okay. But we're really in a moment, I think, to take advantage of the results of this and to reinforce both whoever in the community, both those that thought it was okay already and those that didn't think it was okay, and do it in a personal way that I think is missing from the normal historical ways we do this by just putting out a media release. You know, it's interesting to me to learn about that, you know, that what I read on the Matrix is obviously just what I read on the Matrix, and it is an ongoing evolutionary thing that does include input from others, looking at those recommendations, vetting them and making sure, and we are filling the gaps on what I read between language here and there, and that the role and what the role of the new commission is in the ongoing process and how that plays something important. Ms. Anderson's role to the whole bucket full of tools that we have that didn't exist in the past. You know, this is one of those situations where I don't know what to tell you to do. Well, those are frequent. I don't know what to tell you to do. I just sniff this and say it needs to, it could be more, it's an opportunity not to let go by with just a media release and a hearing in front of ourselves, that kind of thing, because I think there's so many positives that are there both right now and as this continues to organically move forward. So whatever that means, I hope you can pursue that. And again, thank you so much for how we've gotten to right here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Ned.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I think I will just highlight a few of the things that really stood out to me in reading the report, and I'm just going to use the words of the report itself of things that I particularly appreciated. And these are just quotes right from the report, that instead of being a response to controversial incident or an internal crisis of some kind, it was instead a proactive endeavor. That is really so much to the credit of the department and to city administration. The department has welcomed a new chief whose initial efforts to implement change seem to align with the assessment and resulting recommendations in positive ways. They go on to say what we found is that the agency has a number of strengths. It's justifiably proud of its efforts to preserve and enhance public safety in Santa Barbara. It appears to enjoy a wide reservoir of community satisfaction, and it shows a commitment to engaging with the public in progressive, constructive ways. I mean, this from an audit is really exemplary. Also mentioning that some of the recommendations are really meant to just reinforce and build upon positive initiatives we observed or learned about, especially with regard to community engagement. The approaches are with an eye toward embracing contemporary best practices and strengthening policies and internal procedures. This project was generated internally and proactively at the encouragement of the recently departed interim chief and with the support of the city administrator's office. I really doubt very many cities have this model, which is maybe why it was so difficult for the auditors to find large findings. It's because everything is going so well. For the complaint process, the current leadership recognizes this. is an issue and is already shifting approaches and sees that that's warranted. So again, to your credit. We met several individual members of SBPD who impressed us with their energy and commitment to the city, and we learned about 2 programs that, in our experience, are distinctive to the department and reflect well on the agency's overall engagement with Santa Barbara's residents. That was really gratifying to read, as what we know of the community engagement, and then to see that that's being recognized as something that could be put out beyond our own community. And it's a well worth preserving in Santa Barbara and emulating elsewhere. Current members shared their sense that officer wellness was promoted in positive new ways, and that the leadership laid groundwork for community outreach that preceded the murder of George Floyd, and was better positioned to adjust to it when the time came. It's true that the organization can point to impressive aspects of its demography and its category. The department's total number of sworn female officers is uniquely high, and 2 of the top 3 executives in the organization are women. While it also does report that there may be some internal issues to be addressed, I just want to express here that I have full confidence in Chief Gordon and already looking at ways to make the department more integrated in that way. I'll say for myself, it's really clear, of course, that we need to address the staffing shortage. We need you. We appreciate you. We want you to stay. We want our newly sworn officers to stay and our legacy officers to stay. We do need to address that, and I'm sure there'll be more on that. And that was a really thorough answer, actually, on different approaches to being able to recruit and retain. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that, too. I'm just really proud of our police department, and especially for open spirit in participating in this audit. I think we've all been through some pain in this process, and it's really gratifying to see such a favorable outcome. And, you know, if it was all completely positive, then we might be a little bit suspicious, but it highlights a few areas that were already noted that are already being worked on and in process. So very gratified to see that too. And then just to add to Councilmember Jordan's comment, I've actually been really impressed, and I share this with the Coffee with a Cop with the public information officer, that the Facebook and Instagram game is strong. I really am seeing a lot more public engagement and really friendly faces and a lot of opportunities to meet with officers and with the department as a whole, and I think those have been really successful. And then the, I'm forgetting the name of it, the community, where you can sign up and learn all about the processes, Academy?
Community Academy.
Community Academy, and looking at all of those, it really highlights the commitment to working with the community. So just well done, and thank you.
All right, very good. Congratulations, very well done. Madam Clerk, you have another item to read.
Item 9, extension of bike share pilot program.
The mic people are up.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse, council members. Sam Furtner, Mobility Coordinator with the Sustainability and Resilience Department here this afternoon. I'm joined at the table by Jessica Grant, who is our Supervising Transportation Planner with the Public Works Department. We're here this afternoon to discuss the potential extension of our bicycle share pilot program here in the city. Before I get into details, I did want to share our recommendations this afternoon. Firstly, that council receive an update on the bicycle share pilot program. And secondly, that council approve a 3-year extension of the bicycle share pilot program. So to step back a little bit, first of all, what is bike share? How did we get to where we are right now? As a reminder, bike share is really intended to offer a point-to-point transportation option with the potential to reduce traffic and parking demand. It's a service that can provide access to key destinations. It's affordable, and ultimately it's a great option when it's a bit too far to walk, but also too close to drive. And really, as this program has evolved here in the city of Santa Barbara, we have come to look at bike share as an additional active public transit option here in the city. Bike share, as we see it on the ground today, is really the product of City Council's direction back in 2018 in response to shared mobility coming to Santa Barbara. It started with some rogue scooter launches, and at this time, staff went before council for direction about how to manage shared mobility. And what we heard was, let's hold off on scooters and let's get a better sense of how this might evolve. But we are really curious about bike share, and we want you to look into that. I'd like to point out here that bicycle share has been an idea in our city's general plan circulation element for over a decade. It was also identified in our 2016 bicycle master plan, and it does offer a sustainable public transportation option that does further council's goal of carbon neutrality here in the city of Santa Barbara. So with council's direction to look into bike share, staff developed and released a request for applications here in the city. We did receive a number of applications and ultimately decided to go forward with B-Cycle as our permitted operator here in the city, mainly because of the quality of deliverables that they offered. Primarily looking here at their 3.0 dock and their all-electric bicycle fleet. These bikes are governed to 17 miles per hour. They are a pedal assist e-bike, so they only give boost when you're pedaling. And they're also designed for everyday bike share usage in a municipality. They've got a lot of safety features, a lot of anti-theft hardware, and really brilliantly illuminated front and rear lights. So here we are about 2 years into the launch of the bike share pilot program. And I'm happy to announce that as of early April, we did hit our initial goal of 250 e-bikes and 500 docks in service throughout the city of Santa Barbara. We currently have 86 active stations. And I'd like to point out here that our mileage count and our rider count is constantly changing. Even since the publication of our council agenda report, we've added about 50,000 miles ridden on the system. So these stats that you see here, 36,000 miles, riders, excuse me, and 951,000 miles ridden are from mid-April of this year. We do find that these ridership metrics are promising, looking at a 2-year-old bike share pilot program here in the city, and we have been very pleased with B-Cycle as an effective partner in implementing this system. This is a snapshot in time of the bike share network as of March of this year. And as some of you may recall, early on, in the very early days of bike share here in Santa Barbara, the goal was to provide access to key destinations. And we really worked on implementing State Street and some of the waterfront areas first. 2 years in, the network has actually expanded quite a bit, and you can see a lot more of an active transportation network emerging here. As the network has grown, so too have the number of miles ridden since launch. The intent of this graph is really to show a couple of things, that there's a direct correlation between how long and how established the bike share program is, how long it's been functioning and how established it is here in the city, and the number of miles that are ridden. And this is actually more interrelated than it might seem on this graph. As some of you may recall, back in the middle of the pandemic, we had some supply chain issues and we were unable to launch new stations for about 6 months. That dip in the middle of the graph right above month 15 corresponds to that time when the station network was not growing and was not developing, and we did see a decline in ridership during that time. As soon as we started implementing stations and docks, we saw ridership go up again. We use a few tools in assessing the bike share network and how well B-Cycle is performing here in Santa Barbara, but this is kind of a unique metric that we look at. This is a heat map, so the greater concentration of color, if you will, or lack of color in this case, as downtown is white hot, the higher the ridership. This was a snapshot in time taken from the first 6 months of the bike share program launching in Santa Barbara. You can see a lot of focus on that State Street waterfront area. This is a most recent snapshot in time from the previous 3 months of this year until March. And what I'd like to point out in the differences between these two graphics is a lot of development of the network in the Mesa, in the West Side neighborhood. The Milpas Street corridor has a lot of activity, and generally speaking, we're seeing the bike share network expand throughout the city of Santa Barbara. So when we look at heat maps and when we look at, these are discrete user GPS trips that were taken on B-Cycle, one of the things that becomes clear is people ride bikes even where there are no bike share stations in the city of Santa Barbara and beyond the city of Santa Barbara. So that has started a number of conversations about assessing the potential for a regional bike share program. And also, it helps the city identify locations where there might be gaps in the system. So where people might be riding, where we don't have sufficient bike share infrastructure. And that can help identify, underserved areas. It can help indicate, hey, we need to add more docks or bikes at this location. And we use these metrics to help shape the bike share system as it's evolved. Since program launch in January of 2021, we've had 5 documented collisions. B-Cycle has been very good at responding to and documenting these collisions and reporting them to the city of Santa Barbara. And I would just like to point out on this slide that a number of these collisions were actually solo rider events. And there are more details in the council agenda report should you care to read more about this. One of the things that's really helped B-Cycle stand out as an operator here in the city is their attention to detail and providing support when issues do arise. The program has not been without its challenges, and I would say that one of the bigger ones has really been addressing network connectivity. Since launch, we have had issues with checking in and out of B-Cycle e-bikes. Some of that is due to cellular network or Cat5 connectivity issues in certain locations, user errors, certainly firmware and software updates that need to be pushed. But one of the biggest things that B-Cycle has done recently is rolled out a ruggedized industrial SIM card to all of its dock locations, and it has made a huge difference in the consistency and reliability of the network. And so they sent out somebody from their product team in Wisconsin to come help address a problem that we were having, and it has proven very effective. Some of the other challenges that are faced by bike share here in Santa Barbara and certainly bike share elsewhere, generally speaking, vandalism, theft and vandalism are issues that we face. We've seen 16 bikes stolen, 3 of which were not recovered. Quite a few batteries have been stolen, 90 to 100 different types of vandalism. This is consistent with other bike share systems, but I would like to point out that B-Cycle has been really good at recovering lost and stolen bicycles, and their rate of recovery is exceptional, actually. They're super responsive as soon as they realize a bike has gone offline. As far as being responsive as well, one of the things that we appreciate about B-Cycle is with the backing of a larger bike manufacturer, their design continuously evolves and improves. Since launch in Santa Barbara, we've seen battery rail improvements, improvements that enhance the rear brake strength, stronger kickstand. These are all safety features. And then we've also seen, in response to a spate of battery theft, some additional theft deterrent systems that were installed on B-Cycle bikes. This response was very timely. We saw a big bump in battery theft, and within 2 weeks, we had parts in hand and we're installing these on bikes. And then, as I mentioned before, the ruggedized SIM cards as well. When it comes to system pricing, this actually hasn't changed much since B-Cycle was launched in the city. One thing that has changed is we increased the annual membership ride time from 30 to 60 minutes. And the intent here was for our regular users to give them a little bit more flexibility getting all the way across town. So as our network has expanded, we've seen people riding from upper state to the East Beach area to downtown. Most rides were averaging just under 30 minutes. And in fact, some rides were actually going over 30 minutes. So we wanted to kind of facilitate that behavior for our annual members and allow them a little bit more ride time. But our annual membership is $150 for that 60-minute unlimited ride. We do offer a monthly membership as well. B-Cycle has been developing a low-income membership, which is $25 a year for eligible users. And currently we have 70 members that have enrolled in that program and 50 that are actively using it. That eligibility is based upon eligibility for SNAP or CalFresh benefits in the city of Santa Barbara. We also offer a walk-up or single ride rate, which is $7 per 30 minutes. There's a lot of information on the graph here, but what I'd like to point out is the yellow and red bars that you see represent the annual and monthly membership rides here. This is for the month of March here in the city of Santa Barbara. And you can see that our ride volume is actually higher during certain weekdays than it is during the weekend. The dark blue, it's a little hard to see in this graphic, but the other high bar on this chart, the dark blue color, represents the single ride user. And we do see peaks on both Saturday and Sunday for those single ride or walk-up users. We do pay attention to these metrics. They're provided to us every month in an end-of-month summary that we get from B-Cycle to help monitor who's using the program and how. As part of the pricing conversation, when we were initially going to council, we heard some questions about B-Cycle's potential impact on local bike rentals or bike retail shops here in the city of Santa Barbara. As a result, staff has been regularly reaching out to these shops to get their feedback on the program to date. Shops that have both a retail component and a rental component are generally supportive of bike share. I've spoken to a number of shop owners that have said they've sold e-bikes to former B-Cycle users that wanted the consistency of their own e-bike, wanted a lighter e-bike, or wanted a faster e-bike. However, that conversation is a little bit different when you talk to the shops that strictly focus on rental uses. Those shops tend to feel that B-Cycle's pricing undercuts other e-bike rentals in town, and that B-Cycle should increase their walk-up or monthly rates to accommodate that. As a point of reference, most shops that offer rentals in town are around $20 to $25 per hour for an e-bike. I would like to say here that we received feedback from both our Transportation and Circulation Committee as well as our Sustainability Council Committee that we should not increase those rates as they might act as a barrier to new users that wanted to try bike share for the first time. Another metric that we look at to assess the overall performance of the system is what types of members are using B-Cycle. This is since launch in January of 2021. We see about 30% of all rides ever taken were single trips, walk-up users that are not a member of the B-Cycle system. And then we've actually seen our monthly and annual membership rates increase as the network has developed, and we're now at 70% combined for those monthly and annual members since launch. As I mentioned, we are pleased with the success of B-Cycle here in the city of Santa Barbara. There have been challenges, and we are excited about the potential to assess a fully, initial goal capacity launch of bike share here in the city. Post-COVID-19, with a full bike network built out in the neighborhoods, in the key destinations. And our hope is that the coming years will help establish some more representative baseline data from this. I'd like to point out too that the extension of the pilot program allows us and allows Bike Share to evolve with planning efforts, with our climate action plan efforts. And it enables the program to have flexibility moving forward. Extension of the pilot program will allow us to also focus on building out the network, identifying gaps in the network, making sure that those operations and user experience components are really buttoned up, and will allow us to continue to monitor ridership. Additionally, one of the things that staff have been in conversation with is multiple jurisdictions are interested in the potential of a regional bike share program, and continuance of the pilot will facilitate those conversations moving forward. And lastly, will allow the program the flexibility to adapt to potential changes on the State Street Promenade or future planning changes. As I mentioned, we went before our Transportation and Circulation Committee as well as our Sustainability Council Committee for feedback on continuation of the program. We're here before you today with a recommendation to extend the pilot program. Pending your approval, there are some loose ends that would need to be tied up, one of which being to update our operator's permit. B-Cycle does pay a fee to operate in the city of Santa Barbara. We would need to renegotiate that with them. We would need to look again at our coastal development permit. As I mentioned, tie up those components and then ideally start the new pilot phase in February of next year. Again, our recommendation today is that council receive an update on the bicycle share pilot program and approve a 3-year extension of the bicycle share pilot program. With that concludes my presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have. We also have Jesse Rosenberg, who is the general manager of B-Cycle Santa Barbara, in the room with us today. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Questions of the council, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Partner, so really just one question. I've asked it before, and that's, and it might be for the B-Cycle team, but is there any movement at all now that you can get parts and bikes and chips and stuff to look into private property placement? I get out, but not enough, and I know there's one up at Eleen's, which is to me a quasi-public place still, but I'm just curious if you're talking to whatever we call Fest Parkers now, or any of the larger accumulations of people who come through here who would look for that option to, say, go from the waterfront to the Museum of Natural History or something like that, rather than get in their car and drive up there.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, it's an excellent question. The short answer is that we have looked into it, and any private property location in the coastal zone would require a separate coastal development permit, which is a substantial barrier.
No good deed goes unpunished, right?
I didn't say it. And then we have looked at a few locations outside of the coastal zone that we've kind of assessed for potential, but our focus has really been building the network and getting the big locations that are also easiest to implement in the public right of way.
I guess so, just reading between your statement there too, the bang for the buck is really getting somebody from whatever that side of town is. I call it the south, the ocean side of town to the upper part of town, but any implementation of that involves a CDP. So they're getting from the middle to the upper is kind of like less of a bang for a buck, right? I can walk almost. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Just had a question. It came up in sustainability. What happened with the kiosks? Because that was a big question that came up there. If you could explain that, thanks.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, I'm so glad you asked. And yes, we did cover that briefly in the Sustainability Council Committee. So really what happened is a combination of a few different things. We did have council approval to install 2 kiosks on Cabrillo Boulevard to each side of State Street. The intent of the kiosk early in the program was to provide another touch point for community members to say, hey, here's a way to walk up and try B-Cycle. The concern was that people might see the bike infrastructure through town and not really know how to interact with it. Not know, okay, I need to download an app. I need to, what's the interface for this bike share system? And I think that a lot of other B-Cycle locations throughout the U.S. were reliant on the kiosk system as the transition from a strictly dock-based with a kiosk. So like the kiosk would actually open the dock to unlock the bike. It's what you see in LA. A lot of the other larger municipal bike share systems have that. Santa Barbara, with an all 3.0 system, it remained to be seen if that was necessary. Those enrollment kiosks that were approved by council didn't actually control the dock. All they did was communicate to a user, a walk-up user, this is how to interface with the bike share system, and you can sign up for a membership here. With some pandemic-related delays, with some council feedback, we launched 3.0 docks in the city without kiosks. There was an 8-month delay before we could launch in the coastal zone, so we got some time to see how well these 3.0 docks worked in the city. And we found that people, even new users, were having no issue signing up for an app and inputting their information and starting to ride. So with the Coastal Commission delay and the inability to launch in the coastal zone, we saw and we vetted that the 3.0 docks work by themselves. Add to that a delay in actually getting kiosks here in Santa Barbara of 6 months probably, and we realized that the network was building out and working very well, and people were not having issues checking in and out bikes. And we decided to just hold on installing those for the time being. And as the system has become more and more developed, we see less need for those kiosks.
Thank you.
Ms. Nedden.
Thank you. I just have a couple quick questions. One, could you highlight the difference between B-Cycle bikes and maybe privately owned bikes that we're getting some complaints about? I suspect that it's maybe different ridership or different speeds, or maybe if we could be careful to separate those two and highlight that difference.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Snedden, one of the biggest differences is just that a B-Cycle bike is meant for the rigors of municipal bike share. And by that, I mean that it has every conceivable piece of anti-theft hardware. Everything is bolted and torqued to specifications. They're very overbuilt. And the reason I say that is an off-the-shelf e-bike in the state of California can range anywhere from 30 to 70 plus pounds. A lot of those bikes go quite fast. A B-Cycle bike is weighing in right at 60, so they're quite heavy, and they're slow. And part of that is intentional. We've asked B-Cycle to govern their bike share bikes to 17 miles an hour here in the city. You can go faster if you're going downhill, but the pedal assist will not be helping you. Conversely, in the state of California, you can go buy a Class 3 e-bike that can weigh 30 or 40 pounds and go 28 miles an hour. You can also buy a Class 2 e-bike that's in that realm and can go 20 miles an hour with a throttle, so with zero pedaling. So those are the primary differences, is that B-Cycle bikes they're set in sport mode, and they're governed to 17 miles an hour, and they have a lot of safety features that a conventional e-bike might not have.
Thank you. I think that's a really important distinction. And then another question that I came up and I asked at sustainability, but I think the answer is important about, I've gotten a few complaints about e-bikes on beaches. And I think you let me know, maybe you could reiterate your answer to that about whether B-Cycle bikes are used very often on the beaches.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, we have heard reports of people riding B-cycle bikes and e-bikes in general on beaches. I will say that with a narrower tire and very little tread on that tire, riding a B-cycle bike in particular on a beach in sand would be very difficult.
Thank you. And then just one last question. Do we have any information on sort of who is riding the bikes? Is it mostly locals, tourists, younger people, older people, or just whatever? I don't even know what the demographic information I might be interested in, but is there any information on that?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, that is one of the biggest challenges in looking at bike share data in general. We look at it, and I would say that we can make assumptions about who is riding, but we do not have a lot of the demographic data, mainly due to privacy concerns. That being said, several inferences can be made about who's riding bike share. You can look at time of day usage, you can look at day of week usage, and then you can also look at membership type. I would say it's fairly safe to assume that an annual member is probably someone who lives locally. You can't always make that assumption with a monthly member. So it becomes difficult to make categorical, statistically accurate decisions based on the ridership data that we have. One of the things that we do look at, as I mentioned, is the proportion of membership riders as compared to single ride users. And what we've seen is that as the network has grown, we've seen an increase in membership rates. And that proportion has continued to grow for members compared to single ride users. Again, a lot of bike share is very dependent on so many different factors. I think weather will be very interesting to see this year. We had a rainy season, and that might have impacted local ridership. It might have impacted tourist ridership as well. So I think, the next hot weekend that we have in the city when people are really out and riding will tell us a lot about who's riding and how.
Thank you, but it's safe to say it's serving locals. Yeah. Okay.
And anecdotally speaking, I have conversations regularly with users that are locals and use it to commute to work, especially people that work in the downtown core. It's a lot easier than dealing with parking in a vehicle.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Gutierrez.
I had the same questions. The question was on the demographics. If there's any way that the company can do just a general survey, that would really help, because I hear you say it's fairly easy to obtain one of these bikes and ride them around, but my experience and with walking in the neighborhood and having people ask me, do you know how to use, I say no, but I try to help them because because I'm a local and I have a bike. So my personal encounter with people that are not from the area they're still having the difficulties, but I would really like to have some sort of information on who's using the bikes, the demographics. They've been a success in the east side. I know a lot of neighbors are really excited to have those bikes there, so I'm really appreciative of that, but I would like some information on the demographics that are using the bikes. Thank you.
All right, very good. With that, we'll go to public comments. I have one here, Mr. Larry Bickford.
Good afternoon. Oh, I have a little bit of laryngitis still. Good afternoon, Council. I have some comments to make. First of all, to note that I am a member of the Transportation and Circulation Committee and have seen this now for the second time. And thank you for updating the data from what it was 2 months ago. That's great. My comments, I'm going to read from this so I can do it faster. My comments are, as a city resident and bicycle rider, until recently a daily commuter to and from my Upper State Street office, but I've now retired. So my bike becomes, I have my e-bike, for my daily commute, no longer for commuting, but for grocery shopping and running errands. And I gotta say, it's awesome that you can go anywhere around here in minutes, and point-to-point parking is a huge benefit. Regarding the bike share program, I think we have to focus on the fact that this is a trial program and there are still kinks that need to be worked out. And that being said, I think you should try to negotiate for a shorter renewal period. 3 years actually starts in January, if I'm not incorrect, which actually would make it a 3.5 years from now. And during that time, I think there's some data points that need to be addressed. I was under the impression, and you can correct me if I am wrong, but one of the primary goals of the program was to encourage bicycle commuting, there goes my voice, and provide mobility for our community. Building out the system to more residential areas, I think, is critical. The tourist visitor use should only be part of the program. I believe it's great that visitors are exploring Santa Barbara up close on bikes and using their feet instead of cars. That's surely a benefit to the community. Of the, what is it now, 900,000 miles that have been driven, how many have been for commuting or grocery shopping, and how many for recreation? I think we heard tonight that data isn't available. I think to a large extent, knowing how B-Cycle operates, it is. They know exactly where each bike goes and for how long, not to mention the zip code of every rider. Now, I understand the privacy issues.
End of time.
Thank you, Mr. Beckford.
Sorry?
Thank you. That was your 3 minutes.
Oh, I only have another minute?
No, I've got other speakers, and we've got to keep moving on. So, thank you, though. The speakers online, Ms. Clerk.
Yes, we have two speakers. We have Anna Marie Gott and Heather Deutsch. Anna Marie Gott, please go ahead.
Council members, Sam's description of why the city wanted the kiosks is incorrect. The city wanted them for residents and tourists who did not have smartphones or credit cards, period. I urge you to require that B-Cycle install within 30 days the 2 kiosks that the City and Coastal Commission required as part of the bike share programs, if you choose to extend the programs by 3 years, without them, by the way. The kiosks were required when the program launched and were never installed today, as of today, and this is really a matter of both equity and an issue of discrimination, because we are not reaching a staff not to require the kiosks when it was the city's intention all along to require them. Approximately 15% of residents in California do not have smartphones. In 2021, the FDIC reported that 71.5% of households had a major credit card. That means 28.5% of households do not have a credit card, and none of these people that can actually use B-Cycle bike share program in the city of Santa Barbara. It is imperative that the city require B-Cycle to install the 2 kiosks. When the city created the RFP for the bike share program, a specific component of the program included the ability to accept cash payments for non-credit card transactions in order to provide access to residents and visitors without smartphones or credit cards. This component was also required in the pilot program and is a part of the requirement for the coastal development permit. Specifically, B-Cycle was to install kiosks along Cabrillo Boulevard. I think they need to be installed on the east side and west side, but Cabrillo was where the coastal development permits permit them to be. You know, B-Cycle is not installing them simply because staff who have smartphones and credit cards decided on their own that the kiosks would not be required. The city council needs to require them. It is impossible to believe that today we would actually allow this program to move forward without this requirement. Why? Because some of these people are supposed to be using this transportation network, but they can't because they don't have smartphones and they do not have credit cards. Furthermore, the committee members for the Transportation and Circulation Committee
End of
and the
time.
Sustainability Council
Thank you very much.
you to, urge them to expand this for our lower income residents. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Heather Deutsch. Heather Deutsch, please go ahead.
Greetings. My name is Heather Deutsch, and I'm the Executive Director of MOVE Santa Barbara County. MOVE and our members and supporters urge the City Council to support the 3-year pilot extension of the B-Cycle Bike Share program. Bike share is a vital component to providing access to active and sustainable transportation choice in Santa Barbara. And choice is the word I would like to highlight. When we walk or bicycle or take public transportation, we are making a choice to travel with a limited environmental impact. As you should all know, a vehicle produces a pound of CO2 for every mile driven. We save the city substantial amounts of money, whether that is the cost of new roadways, maintaining existing roadways, or widening roadways, which we know is tremendously expensive. And every time someone chooses not to drive, that frees a parking space that could be used by someone else or for more housing, parks, or retail, for example. So having access to a bike share system gives people a choice. I need to get from A to B. It's just a few miles. I could drive, but there's bike share. I'd like to bike, but I don't own a bike. I could drive, but there's bike share. I want to ride my bike, but it has a flat tire. I could drive, but it's a bit too uphill. I could drive, but the bus won't be coming for another hour. I could drive, but there's bike share. So again, I urge you to support this extension. It's something that we really need to see grow. We need to commit to in the city, and we're excited to see what's happened to date. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Are there further speakers, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. This is an action item. We would normally think about a translator break, but I think we may be able to finish this up. So if there are some comments, and then we'll need a motion at some point in time. Ms. Nedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I'll just make quick comments. This program has been more successful than I thought it would be, and I think it's really impressive, those heat maps of how many people are using them and where they're going with them. I will say that the $25 a year for low income is very accessible, and I'm not sure how even a cash exchange would work, because you'd be giving cash and riding away on a bike that is worth a lot more than that and not traceable if you didn't have some other means. So I find the little tag, the little keychain tag, very convenient. And as we talked about in Sustainability Committee, more opportunities to be signing people up when they're signing up for CalFresh, that maybe there's an extra checkbox that says also, would you like a keychain? And would you like to join this program as well? Because CalFresh has been really popular, and I think the schools are doing such a great job of getting that word out. So I think there could be ways, and I know you're looking at ways to make this much more accessible for lower income. And then I really like the feature that for locals, $150 a year annually is also very accessible amount. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's getting so much ridership. I'm very grateful that the kiosks did not go in. That was a very contentious issue, and for me was the sticking point on that. So I'm really seeing this as a boost to our sustainability and that last mile traveled, and as it moves more out into neighborhoods and more local ridership, I just see all the benefits. I'm happy to move the approval of the extension or wait.
Yeah, so we go ahead and name the item B. Is that what your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that? Second by Jordan. Are we clear on that, Madam Attorney?
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, very good. Would you put the, let's go to the scoreboard.
Very good. This is a motion by Councilmember Snedden, seconded by Councilmember Jordan to approve the recommended action.
Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Well done. Okay, we'll go to council staff communication and/or council member engagements. And be Mr. Gutierrez.
I attended the Earth Day celebrations at the parks downtown and did my time at the table on Saturday and Sunday. It was a good experience to speak to residents about some issues that they had, and also got to go to a ribbon cutting for a new business. They make piñatas at the Casa de Raza, so that was a cool experience as well, really fun. And also went to the Latino Business Awards kickoff party, and that was fun to see a lot of local Latino businesses there coming together and celebrating.
Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I also attended the VADA Visual Arts and Design Academy art reception at the CAW. And really, the CAW is such a great community resource for the arts and for different events there. It was really impressive. Also, the Earth Day Festival. Apologies, I had one other, but I think that's good. Thank you.
All right, very good. And recently we hosted the Riviera Ridge School third graders right here in council chambers. A far more pleasant experience than we usually have here in chambers. It was very nice. I also went to the POW event at the Carriage Museum where they honored Adrian Gutierrez along with Aaron Baker. So that was a well-done event. And then last Tuesday, I had to leave early because I had to attend an event in Anaheim. And I want to disclose, I had a speaking engagement and I received an honorarium. And since that we're going through this with Clarence Thomas right now, I don't want to be in the same boat. So I'm going to disclose the honorarium that I received for speaking in Anaheim last Wednesday. Very good. And with that, we will go to closed session. You have some items to read.
Very good. Item 10, conference with city attorney, existing litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9 D1, as described in agenda item 10.
All right, very good. I don't believe there'll be a report out, so.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, and we'll adjourn from there.